Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that in the first week of Black History Month 2026, the President of the United States posted content so fundamentally racist that it shattered the foundational assumption holding the modern Republican Party together? And what if I told you that this wasn't just another political controversy that would fade with the next news cycle, but rather a moment that revealed the complete collapse of institutional guardrails within American conservatism? For the past decade, Republican leaders have operated under a careful fiction. They could support Donald Trump's policies while maintaining plausible deniability about his character. They could benefit from his political energy while telling themselves they were different from his more extreme impulses. They could stay silent during his controversial statements while privately assuring themselves that their silence didn't constitute endorsement. That delicate balance died at 11:47 p.m. on February 5th, 2026, when Trump's Truth Social account published a video depicting Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as apes swinging through a jungle. The imagery wasn't subtle, the timing wasn't accidental, and the Republican response wasn't unified. What followed was the first open rebellion against Trump within the Republican Party since January 6th, led not by moderate Republicans or never-Trump holdouts, but by some of Trump's most loyal allies. The crisis began, as these disasters often do, with what appeared to be routine Trump social media activity. Late Thursday evening, Trump shared a video that initially focused on familiar territory, recycling debunked claims about voting machine irregularities in the 2020 election. For the first 50 seconds, it was standard Trump content, the kind of election conspiracy material his base had seen hundreds of times before. Then, without warning or context, the video cut to a clip from what appeared to be an animated recreation of The Lion King, except the faces of Barack and Michelle Obama had been superimposed onto the bodies of cartoon apes. The song The Lion Sleeps Tonight played in the background as the former first couple swung through digital trees for approximately 3 seconds before the video returned to election footage and ended. The racist imagery lasted less than 5% of the total video duration. But those 3 seconds represented a crossing of lines that many Republicans had convinced themselves Trump would never cross. At least not so explicitly, at least not during Black History Month, at least not when the party was trying to rebuild relationships with minority voters. The immediate response from Trump's closest allies revealed the magnitude of the crisis. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, the only Black Republican in the Senate, and a man who had spent years defending Trump against accusations of racism, issued a statement within hours that shattered years of careful political positioning. Praying it was fake because it's the most racist thing I've seen out of this White House, Scott wrote on X. The word choice was deliberate. Not the most inappropriate thing, not the most controversial thing, the most racist thing. Coming from a senator who had navigated 8 years of defending Trump's record on race, this represented a complete break with previous Republican messaging strategies. Scott's statement was immediately followed by similar reactions from Republicans across the spectrum. Representative Mike Lawler of New York, considered one of the most vulnerable Republicans in Congress, called the post wrong and incredibly offensive, and demanded both deletion and apology. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania called it a grave failure of judgment and absolutely unacceptable from anyone, most especially from the President of the United States. Representative Mike Turner of Ohio described the images as offensive, heartbreaking, and unacceptable. What made these responses historically significant wasn't just their content, but their speed and coordination. In previous Trump controversies, Republican responses typically followed a pattern: initial silence, followed by requests for clarification, followed by carefully worded statements that criticized the controversy without directly criticizing Trump. This time, the criticism was immediate, direct, and personal. But the most revealing aspect of the crisis wasn't the Republican criticism. It was Trump's response to that criticism, which demonstrated a complete misunderstanding of the political dynamics his post had created. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One on Friday evening, Trump refused to apologize and claimed he hadn't seen the racist imagery before sharing the video. "I didn't make a mistake," he told reporters. "I look at thousands of things. I looked at the beginning of it. It was fine." When pressed about whether he condemned the racist portion, Trump said, "Of course I do," but maintained that he bore no responsibility for sharing content he claimed not to have fully reviewed. The explanation satisfied no one and raised additional questions about Trump's social media operation. If Trump personally shares content without reviewing it, what other materials might appear on his accounts? If staff members have access to his Truth Social account, why did none of them catch obviously racist content before it was published? If Trump reviews thousands of things, as he claimed, how does racist imagery escape his attention while election conspiracy content receives his approval? The White House's initial response made the crisis worse rather than better. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt dismissed the controversy as fake outrage, It described the video as an internet meme depicting President Trump as the king of the jungle and Democrats as characters from The Lion King. The statement revealed a stunning misunderstanding of both the historical context of depicting Black Americans as apes and the political significance of doing so during Black History Month. Leavitt's response effectively told Republican allies that their concerns about racist imagery were illegitimate, forcing them to choose between supporting the White House line or maintaining their own positions. The imagery itself carried historical weight that made political damage control impossible. The depiction of Black people as apes or monkeys represents one of the oldest and most pernicious forms of American racism, used to justify slavery, legitimize lynching, and support Jim Crow segregation. The tactic survived Reconstruction, flourished during the era of scientific racism, and remained a staple of segregationist propaganda through the Civil Rights Movement. The fact that this imagery was deployed against Barack Obama, the first Black president, and Michelle Obama, the first Black First Lady during the first week of Black History Month, created symbolism so heavy that no amount of political spin could minimize its impact. The timing amplified the damage exponentially. Black History Month exists specifically to counter centuries of racist imagery and celebrate African American contributions to American society. Publishing racist caricatures of the most prominent Black political figures in American history during this period represented not just poor judgment, but active hostility to the educational and cultural purposes of Black History Month itself. The broader implications extended far beyond social media controversy or even racial politics. The episode revealed fundamental weaknesses in Republican Party structure that could reshape American conservatism. For years, Republican leaders had maintained power by threading an impossible needle, benefiting from Trump's populist energy while maintaining distance from his most controversial impulses. They could support his policies while claiming they didn't endorse his methods. They could remain silent during his controversies while arguing that silence didn't equal agreement. The Obama video made this position unsustainable. Either Republican leaders supported sharing racist imagery of former presidents, or they opposed it. Either they believed such content was acceptable during Black History Month, or they didn't. Either they accepted Trump's explanation that he bears no responsibility for content he shares without reviewing, or they held him accountable for his social media presence. There was no middle ground. The political mathematics were brutal for Republicans facing re-election in competitive districts. Every Republican incumbent would now be asked whether they supported Trump's sharing of racist imagery. Every Republican candidate would be pressed to explain their position on the Obama video. Every Republican fundraising event would include questions about party leadership's response to racist content. The imagery would appear in Democratic attack ads throughout the 2026 election cycle, forcing Republicans to either defend the indefensible or break with their party's leader. But the deeper damage was institutional. The episode demonstrated that the informal guardrails that had previously contained Trump's most destructive impulses had completely collapsed. White House staff either couldn't prevent obviously problematic content from appearing on Trump's accounts, or they chose not to. Republican leadership either couldn't influence Trump's behavior, or they had stopped trying. The political consequences extended beyond domestic politics into international relations. America, whose allies watched the President of the United States publish racist imagery and refuse to apologize for it. Authoritarian leaders around the world gained new ammunition for attacking American moral leadership. International organizations that had already been questioning American commitment to human rights and racial equality received new evidence for their concerns. The episode occurred as the Trump administration was attempting to rebuild relationships with African nations, court Black voters domestically, and present America as a leader in global human rights. The Obama video undermined all of these efforts simultaneously, providing adversaries with powerful propaganda tools that would be deployed for years to come. Looking forward, the crisis represented a fundamental shift in Republican Party dynamics rather than a temporary controversy. The public criticism from Republican senators and representatives couldn't be easily retracted or forgotten. The statements from Tim Scott, Mike Lawler, Brian Fitzpatrick, and Mike Turner created a paper trail of Republican opposition to Trump was racial rhetoric that would influence future political calculations. As we examine this development, we must recognize that we are witnessing something unprecedented in modern American politics. The real-time collapse of political coalitions that have defined American conservatism for decades. The careful balance that allowed traditional Republicans to coexist with Trump's populist movement has been shattered by imagery so fundamentally offensive that silence became impossible. The quiet fiction that Republican leaders could support Trump while maintaining distance from his racial rhetoric died with a 3-second video clip. What emerges from this crisis will determine whether the Republican Party can rebuild itself as a coalition capable of governing a diverse democracy, or whether it will complete its transformation into something entirely different. The Obama video represents more than a social media controversy or political miscalculation. It represents a moment when the contradictions within American conservatism became too large to ignore, when the price of unity became higher than the cost of division, when institutional loyalty conflicted directly with basic human decency. The most troubling aspect of this crisis isn't the racist imagery itself, but what it reveals about the complete breakdown of institutional checks within the modern presidency. The fact that such content could appear on the official social media account of the President of the United States without apparent review suggests that the informal guardrails that have historically prevented such incidents have been systematically dismantled. The mathematical reality facing Republican leadership is unforgiving. Every day they remain silent about racist imagery published by their party's leader is a day they become more complicit in legitimizing such tactics. Every statement defending Trump's right to share content without reviewing it is an argument that could be applied to any future controversy. Every attempt to minimize the significance of racist imagery during Black History Month is a position that will be remembered by voters, opponents, and historians. The long-term implications extend beyond partisan politics into fundamental questions about leadership accountability and institutional credibility. If a sitting president can publish racist imagery and face no consequences beyond temporary criticism, what other boundaries have been eliminated? If racist caricatures of former presidents become acceptable political discourse, what forms of political expression remain off limits? Friends, the consequences of this moment will extend far beyond the current news cycle, reshaping not just the Republican Party, but the entire landscape of American politics for years to come.